Welcome to class. Today we'll talk about register and style. We are familiar with terms like language, dialect, vernacular, standard language, non-standard language, right? In the same uh, class, based on the use, we have variations in the language, and they're called register and style. So today we are going to talk about register and style. But before we begin, let us understand the idea called dialect. What is a dialect? And is it a different language? Is there any difference between language and dialect? Or are they the same? See, the moment we say dialect, we assign a kind of uh, low prestige value to the variety. And when we say language, notionally we believe that a language is a standard form used in formal domains, has a high prestige value, and it has written form. But as such, there is no difference between a dialect and a language. These are two different terms. Dialect is socio culturally and politically determined. We all speak a dialect. We all speak dialect of an in quotes imagined language. We don't speak a language, we speak a dialect. It may be standard dialect. A particular dialect may be chosen to be standard dialect for all official administrative formal usages. Becomes language. So those varieties of a language or within that language family, that variety which gets institutional support is used in formal domains, has written literature, reference materials, manuals. So, in some way, it has been, processed to be standard. So, some external agency, you know, takes lead in processing and developing it as a standard dialect to be used for all official, administrative, government, and media, science and technology, education purposes. So, as a linguist, as a student of linguistics or language science, we don't find any linguistic basis of, of distinguishing a dialect from a language. All dialects are equally competent, equally rich, and qualified to be used in all formal domains. Right? So, the whole idea of standard language is politically and socially motivated. We might have we might have such discussions in our other videos about the process of standardization, how a particular dialect is chosen, right, to be standard language, how it is made standard, and selection, codification, so how we create a corpus, how we create reference manuals, thesaurus, dictionaries, style sheets, and make it uniform, and assign prestige value to it in terms of status planning. We create a lot of material, supporting material in terms of corpus planning, and then we go for educating our next generation or young children and helping them acquire this variety called acquisition planning. So it is planned by agencies, those agencies which claim statutory rights. So this is a prescriptive deliberate initiative. Otherwise, All languages that we speak are a form of a particular variety of a particular language. So they're dialects. We all speak dialects. So we don't find any linguistic basis for differentiating between language and dialect. But in broader understanding among the common people, dialect is seen as inferior to language. So the kind of prestige value that you assign to a particular dialect becomes a language. So we don't find any difference between the two linguistically speaking. And there is no universally accepted criterion for distinguishing these two varieties of language, dialect from language. And the distinction between dialect and language is therefore subjective, arbitrary, and it depends on the user's preferred frame of reference. So, how you look at a dialect, that determines whether it is a dialect or language. So, frame of references, right? So, there are certain frames of references which help us, understand or identify a dialect. But one thing for sure, that dialect, the idea called dialect or the term called dialect is socially and politically motivated. Otherwise, there is hardly any difference between a dialect and a language. All dialects are equal, no hierarchy attached. We may find variation in language use, variation in language in terms of this geographical location, right? So, in a particular region, a particular variety is spoken with some variations at the level of phonology, at the level of morphology, at the level of syntax, structural differences, right, at the level of vocabulary. So, you might find variation, in a particular region. Sometimes you might find variations depending on the class and the caste, the class, social class. So, but these variations can be understood in terms of the three frames of references and how we determine that variety X is a dialect of a particular language. We have to look at that dialect, that variety with a particular frame of reference, and these frames of references are linguistic distance, right, mutual intelligibility, and socio-political factors attached to it, right. So, when we say linguistic distance, that means we are strictly talking in terms of structural variations, variations at the level of sounds, variations at the level of vocabulary, variations at the level of syntactic, morphosyntactic structures. So, to what extent, to what degree we find these variations, right? So, dialects are different varieties with little variations that I am talking about. So, they are distinct enough to be seen as a different variety, but not different enough to be called a separate language. So, the linguistic distance, if the linguistic distance is closer, if the variations are not very high, right, then that particular variety is dialect of that particular language. The second frame of reference is mutual intelligibility. So, to what extent two varieties of a language are mutually intelligible. So, speakers of both the varieties understand each other, though they use two different set of variables in their language, but they are able to understand each other. So, communication is not blocked, and they can communicate, share, and interact comfortably. So, if it is possible that the mutual, if the mutual intelligibility is possible between variety X and variety Y, we call it two different dialects of language X, right? X1 and X2. If they are mutually intelligible, they are a variety of language X. So they are dialects of language X. So the first frame of reference is linguistic distance. So these differences are not too much. So when the dialect or the variety shows close affinity with the language, it is a dialect. And then when the 2 or 3 or 4 different varieties and the speakers of these varieties are able to understand each other, and if these varieties are mutually intelligible, if these varieties do not create communication gap, then they are dialects of the same language. Then socio-political factors. So it refers to the linguistic attitude, language attitude, social linguistic attitude that you have towards a particular variety. And what kind of value is attached? Judgmental values are attached, prestige values are attached, right? How do you look at this particular variety, right? So these factors determine whether it will be considered a separate language or a variety. I mean, if you look at Census of India 2011 data, and if you look at the mother tongues, even in scheduled mother tongues like Hindi, for example, you find more than 40 languages attached to Hindi, put under Hindi bracket as dialects of Hindi. Bhojpuri, Angika, Bajika, Maghi, Braj, Avadhi. So they are all put in one bracket under Hindi, right? With the belief that they are mutually intelligible, the linguistic distance is not very far, and putting them under Hindi in the Hindi heartland. These languages are spoken in the northern part of India. There are certain socio-political factors attached to it. So they are considered dialects of Hindi. So depending on what frame of reference you are looking at, we determine whether X and Y are dialects of a particular language or not. So this is the dichotomy, and this is the uh, broad understanding of difference between language and dialect. But as a student of language and language science, linguistics, we find no difference between a language and a dialect, except for certain external factors which attribute such classification. Otherwise, each dialect is a potential language. They are different. Each dialect can qualify to be a standard language. But this process of standardization is political, institutional. So it can be any dialect, and all dialects qualify. We choose one to standardize and use in formal domains. So all speakers, as speakers of a particular language, we all speak a particular variety. But that particular dominant variety becomes standard language by institutional interference, and it becomes a language. So there is no difference, linguistic difference. There is no linguistic argument on the basis on which we can determine a status of language as a dialect or standard language. So they are almost like synonymous, linguistically speaking. But the broader understanding says that language is that a particular dialect which is standard, has written form, has corpus, literature, grammar books, reference books, style manuals. So they are standard language. Now, a dialect is a regional, temporal or social variety within a single language group, right? So a dialect which is spoken in a particular region with a definitive set of variations from its siblings, it is regional dialect. When a particular language with certain uh, set of variables is used by a particular social class, it is called a sociolect, right? So, it can be temporal, it can be social, it can be regional. Uh, a dialect differs in terms of grammar, pronunciation and vocabulary from the standard language, right, but not different enough to be called a separate language. So, mutual intelligibility plays a crucial role in deciding whether it is a language or it is a dialect or an independent language, right. But this division is purely political, purely social, right. There are social factors, political factors, no linguistic argument and basis on which we can distinguish. Now, regional dialects, as the name suggests, are spoken by people of a particular region or geographical space. So, you can have something like Tamil as a language has multiple varieties. Madurai Tamil, for that matter, has little variation. Chennai Tamil, for that matter, right? Punjabi, Punjabi in Chandigarh, and Punjabi is the remote part of Punjab. They're different, but both the language is Punjabi with dialectal variations. Look at Hindi for that matter. Look at Hindi for that matter. So, Hindi has many regional dialects, variants, varieties. Uh, Bhojpuri for that matter. Though Bhojpuri is listed under Hindi in census 2011, but Bhojpuri is a well established language and it has variants like Nagpuri, like Purbi, right? For that matter, Mauritian Bhojpuri, Mauritius Bhojpuri spoken in Mauritius is different. But mutual intelligibility is the criterion that brings it close to the referent language called Bhojpuri. We call it a referent language because we all speak a particular variety, right? Angika for that matter. So, a variety which is geographical was spoken at a particular geographical location, a particular region specific, is called regional dialect. Okay. Then sociolect. It refers to a particular variety within the same language spoken by a particular social class. So, sociolect, right? And in the same continuation, if the dialect is, a variety according to the user, register a term refer to a particular variety is according to the use of the language. So, it's use centric, it is context centric, it is domain centric, right. The term register for a particular variety used in a particular domain by the same speaker, right, a different form or a different variety is used for a different purpose. So, this term register was first used by T.W. Reed in 1956 and it was later popularized by many linguists who were working on language variations. So, working on variationist tradition and they were working on language variations and they were trying to understand, right, language variation according to the user defined by social determinants like background, their social background status, their geographical location, sex and the age. So, they wanted to see variations based on these determinants and this term became popular, register. Halliday says, I quote, each speaker has a range of varieties and choices between them at different times. So, I, as a speaker of a particular variety, choose a different form of that same variety for a particular purpose. So, I can be highly formal if I am giving talk in a seminar. I am so using the same language, but my form of language will be different. My tone will be different. My tenor will be different. Choice of words will be different. The degree of formality, style will be highly formal. If I am talking in a seminar, it will be more analytical and formal, argumentative. If I am talking about the same topic with my family members within the confines of my drawing room, my style of speaking will be casual, informal. Choice of words will be informal, right? And my tone, my tenor will be entirely different from that of my same talk in a formal seminar. So, it is according to the domain where I am using this variety. So, registers are the domain specific varieties used by the same user in a different socio-cultural context, right? So, the study of dialect is further complicated. I quote from Vado and Fuller, 2015. The study of a dialect is further complicated by the fact that speakers can adopt different styles and registers of speaking, and both spoken and written language can be seen as belonging to different genre of language. So, they are not changing the variety, they are changing the form of it. So, form in terms of lexical choices, form in terms of tone, form in terms of tenor, form in terms of degree of formality, right? That is called a register. So, while differences in dialects have to do with speakers and their regional or social identities, styles, registers and genre have to do with different context of use. So, language and dialect are the varieties according to the user and how they construct identity out of it, the variety that they socialize in, that they are conditioned in. But registers or styles are the form of that particular variety according to the context or the domain in which it is used. That is the difference we need to understand, right? So, I can be using same dialect, same language on different occasions in different domains with a different degree of formality, with a different degree of lexical choices, with a different degree of tone, with a different degree of tenor. So, it is based on the contextual use of it. So, it is use centric. Dialects and language are user centric. That we need to understand the distinction. So, we can deduct register is another complicating factor in any study of language varieties, and generally speaking, registers are the sets of language items associated with discrete occupational and social groups. So, we do not find a huge difference in terms of phonology, morphology or syntax like we find in dialects. The variation here is the situation, social situation or the context or domain where you are using it. So, you may be using the same variety or language, but the degree of formality differs. The degree of tonal differences, tenor differ, right? They are different. So, it is domain specific, context specific use of the variety. AGA 2006 describes a register as a linguistic repertoire that is associated cultural internally with particular social practices and with persons who engage in such practices. So, for example, we have we have a few words and terms used in medical sciences. Then, occupations like engineering, then occupations like, let's say, sports, academics, right? So you have domain specific set of lexicons and words which are used and understood and they are in high currency in that particular domain. They are not in ordinary speech. They are not found in ordinary speech. So when you are addressing uh, a group of doctors in any medical seminar, your style, your register will be focused on, or it will be medical science centric. So the terms, the jargon, technical words that you are using are understood by those experts and specializations, people with a specialization in medical sciences. But you cannot use the same variety or same form of language outside that domain. So it is domain specific. Engineers, in the gathering of engineers, right? So this is register. Uh, Speakers learn different registers through socialization process, right? So when I am trained, if I am trained as a medicine practitioner in medical sciences, my register will be different, limited to that, restricted to that particular domain. I may be trained as engineer, so my register will be different within that domain, right? So if I am a religious preacher, my register will be entirely different. So it depends on the domain or the context in which you are using it. So registers are domain centric, context centric form of language, form of variety that we use in our speech acts, right? Um, so, so registers help us create multiple identities. So, I am a speaker of language X. Okay, that's one identity I have. Then I am an engineer. So my register in that particular engineering domain will be different, right? So registers help us construct an identity at a specific time and place. The same young lecturer giving lecture in the class using a different form of language, of the same language, and the same lecturer meeting you in the let's say college canteen will be talking to you in the same language, but the tone, tenor, and degree of formality will be different. The same lecturer talks to wife and family members and kids inside the house is a different person. No, the same person, the same language, but degree of formality, tone, and tenor are different. Right? The same lecturer talking to friends in a very informal setting. So the form of variety that you are using, the form of language that you are using in a particular domain, right? That is your register. So you have different registers and different identities in different domains within the same language or variety. So that is register and style for you. Talking about style, uh, we can speak very formally and we can be very casual and informal in our conversation. So when to become highly formal and when to become informal, casual and relaxed, it is determined by the socio-cultural circumstances. They are governed by these such choices are governed by socio-cultural circumstances. So, for example, ceremonial occasions where you have rituals. Let's say, valedictory function, and look at the kind of tone, tenor, and formality in the language that we speak, that we use in public gathering, right? Let's imagine convocation function. After you complete your degrees, you get your degrees in a formally organized convocation ceremony, and the look at the, for example, announcements, how they're, look at the proclamations, announcements, or you know speech on that occasion. So ceremonial occasions, and we are highly formal in our use of that language. If I am giving a lecture in public, general public, I am formal, but not to the degree I am formal giving a convocation speech. So I am less formal, but not casual at all. Then casual occasions, like conversations, like I'm talking to my family members in my drawing room, talking to my friends in a restaurant, right? Even talking to you in a marketplace, if I happen to meet you in a marketplace, the way I'm talking to you, the way I'm using that particular language, I'll be casual and informal, right? And very intimate conversation, then you are highly informal and casual. So the degree of formality, right, or the style of your speech that you choose is determined by, is governed by the circumstances and socio-cultural contexts. It also depends on the participants in your speech act who are participating, right? So, level of formality depends on various factors in that sense. The kind of occasion, as we talked about ceremonial occasions for that matter. Also, various social age, various factors like social uh, category, age, and other differences that exist between participants in that speech act. Uh, what kind of task is involved here? Am I talking or am I writing? Degree of formality vary. So, because written forms are highly frozen forms. So, I'm very formal while I write. So, when we write about certain things, they're very formal. You can explain, let's say, the skills involved in uh, cooking something, a particular dish, right, in a very casual, formal, informal way. You can also be formal while you are talking about a particular recipe to a group of people. But when you write the recipe of the same dish, the degree of formality increases. You become expressive, more formal, and that particular language form differs from. So even the content, even if the contents are the same, the form of language changes. So there are multiple factors which govern and determine what form and to what extent will be formal in our speech in a particular domain at a particular occasion. So moving on, dialects are the varieties according to the users, but registers are varieties according to use, right? And we can have examples of registers like scientific, religious, legal, commercial, you know, airport announcements, railway station announcements, registers of telephone operators, registers in call centers. So language remains the same, but the context changes, and that's why we have variations. So we have various different forms being used here, right? You might see static forms, like for example, railway announcements. So that is frozen, almost frozen. We don't find any variation anywhere on any railway station. That is almost frozen. Announcement at airport, right? Announcements of delays of the flights, announcements of the delays of the trains. Your inconvenience caused is deeply regretted. Such a frozen line. We all the time see, hear that. If you talk to your call center executive, the same speech format, frozen speech format, right? Almost similar words and sentences. So we have different registers, a form of language used in science and technology, form of language used in religious deliberations and discussions and speech. Then you have language in legal, uh, legal language for legal purposes. So legal languages. When we say legal language, I don't mean anything called illegal language. Legal language means language used in legal fraternity, judiciary. So you find the proclamation of sentences in judgments almost frozen. So these are different registers. Uh, so talk in a religious gathering can be serious and full of static expressions. When you are performing rituals, the priest can be highly static and frozen in terms of expressions and sentences. Then talk at seminar can be very analytical, argumentative. Discussion with friends and family can be highly informal and casual. So registers are the variety of language or the form of language used or implied according to the situation, according to the context. So registers are use centric, dialects are user centric. That distinction we have to make, and that distinction we have to understand. Now, when we look at registers and formality scale, registers can be understood in terms of scale of formality and style. So, we do not have a clear cut definition and understanding, but we all broadly understand, right? It's like, understanding difference between dialect and register, language and register, dialect and language is like, distinction between a hill and a mountain. Now, broadly we do understand what is a mountain and what is a hill, what is a cup and what is a mug. We do understand broadly. What is a bed and what is a couch or sofa. We do understand broadly. Difference between chair and sofa, right? It is cultural and highly relative, right? So, what if, suppose I am talking about difference between cup and a mug. What if we have the shortest mug possible and the tallest or the biggest cup possible? If I start increasing the size of the cup to an extent, and if I start decreasing the size of a mug to an extent, there comes a point when we find no difference, almost overlapping. So, it is the range. So, the distinction is clear at extremes, but as we move closer, the distinction blurs. So, degree of formality also is highly relative and subjective, right? But broadly we understand what is informal form of language, what is formal form of language, what is the degree of formality. We broadly understand. So, Martin Jones came up with, uh, 5 distinctions. So, he gave a scale of formality, and we do not have a clear cut agreement as to how a spectrum of formality is divided. However, Martin Joos describes 5 styles in spoken English, and these are: number 1, frozen, right? Formal, consultative, casual, and intimate. So Martin Joos gives us 5, different categories or labels in degree of formality in spoken English, and it is applies to all languages, right? It simply applies to all languages. So frozen or a static register means uh, in the majority cases written forms which are pronounced or spoken at religious occasions, rituals, all kinds of pledges that we take, oaths, a statutory oath that we take, all sorts of text related to rituals. So we don't make a variation, they are frozen, static. And even if we speak in the similar verbatim form. We don't change the words, we don't change the orders, we don't change the text. It remains the same. Like for example, if you go to marriage ceremony in a church, the way the priest pronounces the wedding, right? Or look at the oath ceremonies that we have. When we take oath, the form or the text is frozen. Everyone, except for changing the name, speaks the same thing. So this is called frozen or a static register. Then formal. And what is the characteristics of formal register? Informal registers, as Martin Joos says, one-way participation, right? That means it's, so for example, if I am giving a talk in a seminar, in a conference, I am reading a paper in a conference, I am giving a seminar in a conference, talk in a conference, right? No interruptions. I finish my talk and in between no interruptions, right? I allow people to ask questions at the end of my presentation, right? So that is formal, highly formal. But you might have seen certain talks in which anybody can ask any question anytime. That is consultative. So when you speak, you can have counter questions. People can intervene, interject, ask questions, intervene. So that is consultative, right? So consultative form or the degree of formality involves two-way participation, right? Background information is provided, prior knowledge is not assumed, anybody can ask any question if somebody doesn't understand, interruptions are allowed, and so when I'm talking to you, I'm teaching you, I'm giving a talk in the class, anybody can raise hand, ask questions. Even if you do not have any prior knowledge of the topic, you can talk and ask or raise your doubts. It's consultative, that means interactive, right? So both the partners interact. In formal register, we have one-way participation, no interruptions, and the context and the specifications are very important, right? Exact definition is important of the terms. It includes presentations or introductions between strangers. So it follows a but very highly formal format and one-way, participation. But when we talk about consultative, it is interactive. It is two-way participation. It allows the other partner in your communication act, speech act, to ask questions, raise questions, interject, intervene. Then we have casual, Then he says the casual scale. So in casual registers, we have in-group friends, close friends, family members, where interruptions, overlaps in speech, selection of casual, tone is casual, tenor is casual, informal, selection of words, we are not particular about selecting a particular set of words, definitions and background assumptions are not important. So you are freely talking. Intimate is the highest degree of informality. So it is purely non-public, and intonations more important than wording and grammar. How you will have lots of idiosyncrasies, half finished sentences, overlapping speech. So that is intimate, right? So it is highly popular and used among close family members, your wife, your girlfriend, your mother, and very close friends. So that is intimate. So Martin Jones gives us 5 scales: frozen, formal, consultative, casual, and intimate. But again, degree of formality and choice of words, sentences, right, the tone, the tenor, they are governed by the social situation in which we use a particular variety or dialect or language. So, in conclusion, we can understand that language and dialects are the varieties of language according to the user, right? But registers and styles are the form of language, which is use centric. So you use them in a particular domain. They are linked to your occupation. They are linked to your profession, right? They have a set of domain specific words. We call them jargon, technical words, right? And the degree of formality depends on the occasion and the participants. So, who are the participants and what is the occasion? So, this is register and style. So, I hope that we now understand the difference between dialect and register, right? We will continue our discussion about genre, register, the style, dialect and language in following classes. And when we talk about language contact and variation, we will again come to this topic. So this is it for now, and post your questions in the forum, and we'll have a recapitulation of all these ideas towards end of the course. So for now, thank you very much.